What are some of the scenarios you've seen that we've helped people with where this has really shined, that hybrid capability? Jeff, maybe some specific
Well,
examples.
it's interesting how you say that question too, because that opens up depending on who the audience is, right? We are very fortunate to have a client that is, I would say, mid-enterprise, meaning 300 to 400 employees, but runs 1,500 VMs and has petabytes of data. So because of that, then you really get to utilize, oh, here's where an instance would work better in the cloud and in Azure in particular, and here's where it needs to stay on-prem because of horsepower or demand, or it's constant, meaning if something's running 7 by 24 and it needs to be on-prem and it's run, and and you don't have to, the meter's not running on your own hardware, right? It was a CapEx expense, and you have to know that you're going to use that CapEx for its entire length of that product's life so that you can get the most out of it. But if you've got the size, or you're developing software, or you want skunk work projects, you're not even sure if that project's going to get daylight or not as far as a production or by executives and so forth. But they want you to run this, and we want to figure it out for the next 3 to 4 months. Well, do I go out and buy $100,000 worth of hardware and disk and everything for a project that
Right.
may or may not work? Right. So that makes a lot of sense to go ahead and spend the monthly amount. And then if it does become something that is okay, we're going to turn this into a product. Now, if it's going to run for the next 3 to 5 years, is it better to CapEx this thing and run it on hardware? Or is it better to continue to have this meter running and run it? And I'll tell you another thing that's interesting along when we talk about the meter running. I never used to think about this because I'm not a finance guy. I'm an engineer guy, and the finance part of it is that there are companies that need to have capex. I never
Right.
thought about that before. That is actually one of the driving parameters between the two. Everybody likes to say, "Oh, well, if you put it in the cloud, your cost is commensurate to your use, and therefore, you can charge." And there are some cases that work like that. But in others, they need to have a capex. They have to have that on their balance sheet. So not everybody has that dilemma, but that is another area. So, back to your
Yeah.
question of what are some use cases you see. I'll throw one out there that's very unique. Okay, but I think people might be able to understand from that. One of our clients has a password hacking application, and they do it because they have to get into certain files that as a service for their clients. But it happens only once in a while. They don't need to spend. They need the horsepower of $100,000 server, meaning it's got to have some massive GPUs in there because, man, it takes a lot to go through these typical things. But they only do it once every 2 or 3 months. So why would I spend all that money when I can take this application, I can put it in Azure, and I can put it into, yes, it'll be an expensive one with hot disk and maybe some GPU relationship, but I only have to turn it on when I need it. And so I think that that's one way I've always guided people is, if you're going to use something just once in a while, or you're going to burst and it has these big peaks to it, don't build a data center, don't build an infrastructure of hardware for the peak, because that's expensive. It's build it for your common usage and either peak it into Azure, or if it's only used on a certain basis, like the example I just gave, let's go ahead and just put that whole thing in Azure. That's that's one of the instances.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other big things that's kind of changed to make this a lot more approachable is the admin and security layers, right? It used to be you were either managing on premise and you were in your Nutanix portal, your VMware portal, or you were managing in Azure and you were in your Azure portal, and they didn't talk, right? There wasn't a lot of interaction there. But whether it's Microsoft's server management application that can run cloud and local, and you can run all your servers and see them from an admin perspective, local and in the cloud, or it's a product like Azure Local, which is literally running Azure code on a server in your desk, in your office, your data center, but it's a unified management portal. It's the Azure portal. Or it's some of the security features. We can run, Windows Defender for endpoint on servers in the cloud and local. You can run Azure Arc in the cloud and local. You can run all these collectors from the Azure perspective, where your security posture is showing resources in the cloud and local in the same portal, even if it's not on Azure Local. It's on that Nutanix box, but you got an agent running on every one of those servers, and it all uploads to the cloud, and you can get your compliance reporting and your risk assessments and your vulnerability reporting all from those amazing Azure portals. but it works on-prem and in the cloud. So there's some real cool layers that have been added that really make a big difference from that perspective.
I think that that comes back to that comment about the technology catching up with the desire. The desire has always been there to do these things, but when you're running multiple tool sets and multiple, you know, global admins on different products and who has what and access to what, yeah, it does become not only an administrative difficulty, but also a security difficulty. And now that technology is, or I should say the technology has been there, but the administration of the technology is catching up with what people really want to do and keeping it compliant and keeping it safe in the security world at the same time as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.